It's House in Baltimore and the big old plane down at Dulles Airport on Tuesday night. We will be in London beginning on Wednesday for 5.5, we hope, glorious days over in the UK. This guy is getting his passport stamped for the very first time. Born in 1983 and finally leaving the United States of America for the former motherland. They call them Pommies in Australia. That's prisoner of Mother England. He is Luke Jones. The Ravens hope to not be prisoners of Mother England and the Jacksonville Jaguars, but a perfect record. Luke, this has worked out okay. I mean, for all the angst, all the problems, the injuries, and now we're going to deal with Yanda and what we had going on with Flacco. The defense has now played 8 quarters of division football and has surrendered, for better or worse, 10 points. Hasn't always been pretty. Certainly did not get a very pretty version of Eric Weddle. There were no defensive guys bragging about their efforts in the locker room after the game on Sunday. They were a little embarrassed by the big play. But that being said, the stats don't lie, as they say. 2-0 and the defense is the story, right?
Well, you get 5 takeaways a game. That's going to be the difference most weeks in the NFL, unless your offense turns it over 6 times, which the Ravens have done a pretty good job not turning the ball over too much. But it's interesting that you mentioned Eric Weddle and a few other individuals, Terrell Suggs, heard a couple other members of that defense in the post-game locker room. That's what was kind of impressive to me was they weren't all that pleased with their performance. And you look at it, they gave up 386 yards. They gave up 300 passing yards. They gave up 4.4 yards per carry. You look at all those numbers, and just looking at those numbers alone, you'd say, okay, well, that wasn't a great performance. But
if they give up 386 yards to Cleveland in December, they'll lose to them, I bet, right? I mean, they can't have this kind of an effort again, right?
Well, getting to my point, though, if you ask any coach, you ask any defensive player worth his salt who really gets it, they will tell you they care about basically 4 categories. They will say points allowed, they will say third down defense, they will say red zone defense, and they will say how many takeaways did they force, how many turnovers did they force. And this team allowed 10 points on Sunday. The Browns were 2 of 12 on third down. They were 0 for 1 in the red zone, and the Ravens forced 5 turnovers. So there you go. That adds up to a really good defensive performance. Now, it wasn't perfect. They certainly had some blown coverages. They certainly gave up some big plays. They let someone named Rashard Higgins, who, as much as we were talking about Alex Collins being promoted from the Ravens practice squad, the wide receiver for the Browns, their leading wide receiver, was promoted on Saturday as well from the practice squad, and he had 7 catches for 95 yards. So there was plenty of things that you can pick apart, plenty of things that you can nitpick and say, okay, that needs to get better, that needs to get better. Their pass rush was okay at times, and then there were other times where, whether it was Deshaun Kaiser or Kevin Hogan, they got a little bit too much time to throw, and that's when they were able to make some plays. So it wasn't perfect, but when you make those splash plays, when you are that difference-making kind of a defense, those game-changing turnovers, which, let's face it, I mean, this is a team that, going back to 2013, 2014, 2015, statistically, the defenses didn't always look terrible. Their rankings were usually respectable, but I went back and looked at it. In 2015, the Ravens forced a total of 14 turnovers for the entire season. This team has 10 in 2 games. So they have nearly matched their total of takeaways from 2 years ago. One, it shows that defense wasn't very good when it needed to be as far as making those game-changing plays. And 2, it just shows you how opportunistic this defense has been. They played really well for large stretches of time as well. It's not as though they've been only about turnovers, but that's been the big story. When you're talking about a defense that has forced 10 turnovers in 2 games, yeah, that is going to be a formula to win. Probably better than 9 out of 10 times. You're probably talking about 95 out of 100 times. You force 5 turnovers, you're going to win games unless your offense is just even worse at protecting the football than the opposition.
How about that old man Ladarius Webb out there ball hawking 2 weeks in a row, huh?
Yeah, Ladarius Webb, he had a couple plays where coverage probably wasn't up to the standard he liked, but certainly, he's been a part of it. I mean, they've had lots of guys with getting their hands on footballs. I mean, it's encouraging to see that. I mean, you want to see that, knowing that you don't have an offense that's necessarily equipped to go out and score 30 or 40 points a game. I mean, very few offenses are able to do that consistently. So understanding that, how do you make the difference? How do you make up that deficiencies you have on the offensive side of the ball? By putting them on a short field. And the Ravens were able to do that on a couple occasions. So it was great to see that. I mean, the first touchdown, Ravens had a 33-yard drive. I mean, that's their final touchdown. Macklin, the 2-yard pass right before halftime, that was a 40-yard drive. I mean, it's you put your offense on the short field, even lesser offenses can typically operate and be successful if you give them good field position. So these turnovers have been huge, and it hasn't just been one individual. Tyus Bowser had a pick, Brandon Carr had another pick, Eric Weddle had a fantastic diving interception on a pass that lacked touch from Deshaun Kaiser. Let's call a spade. Probably more a case of a bad play from him, and maybe Weddle, certainly a spectacular kind of interception,
yeah.
But most quarterbacks don't make that kind of a mistake there. But, hey, you take advantage of the opponent that you face. And I said this to you late in the second half. I thought perhaps the best thing that happened to the Ravens, not that I was buying for a second that Kevin Hogan was going to beat them by any means, but I thought the Browns moved much more efficiently and they played with more confidence, and I thought he played with more confidence against the Ravens defense than the rookie Deshaun Kaiser did.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. He will be at Wembley, as will I, and our crew headed over to London. We're only planning one event. We're taking our big hearty group over there for the week. One event, one day, Saturday, 11 a.m. We're all meeting at the Fox at XL. It's a pub. Delicious fish and chips. They have the delicious mushy peas with the mint that I like so much in it. About 2 blocks away from the Emirates Air cable car. We're going to take that across the River Thames to the O2 Saturday afternoon. We hope to have you join us for some fish and chips and some cheer over in London town. And the Ravens go over at 2-0. And I don't know what the bigger story is. Just the defense in general. And we'll get to the blown coverages in a minute. But Terrell Suggs yet again, and I know we gave him extraordinary praise last week. It has not been my style over the first 14 years of his career to overpraise Terrell Suggs, but dude, he's a factor, and if he can stay healthy and sort of spry like this, he's disruptive as hell right now, right?
Sure. I mean, the big question is going to be, how does he hold up over 16 games? I mean, you're talking about someone who's going to be 35 next month, and that's just reality. That's not to be dismissive of how he's played over these first couple weeks. I mean, this has looked like the Terrell Suggs we saw in 2011, who was Defensive Player of the Year. Do I think he's going to be able to keep up this extremely high level of play? Probably not, but that said, it is a testament to a guy in year 15 that you're talking about him being the best player on that defense to this point. I mean, he had 1 sack, easily could have had a couple more. I mean, he was credited with 4 quarterback hits. The Ravens had 10 quarterback hits as a defense. It shows what kind of, at times, harassment, other times, Deshaun Kaiser held on to the ball too long. I mean, it's the same thing that happened to him against Pittsburgh last week.
But he might be okay. He showed me that a little something. I think he'll be their quarterback again in December. I think he'll be their quarterback again next year. I think he's going to be the guy for a little while there.
I think there's a potential. I think he did some nice things. I thought Kevin Hogan did some nice things. The Ravens had some issues with their coverage. Certainly some tight end coverage. They had some issues there. Certainly I mentioned the practice squad call-up, Rashard Higgins, who really gave them some problems. But I think Kaiser flashes. And I think anyone who followed his career at Notre Dame would have said he probably would have been better off staying at Notre Dame another year. Certainly would have put himself in the conversation to be a first-round pick rather than being a second-round pick like he was.
But he made more money last week than he would have planned at Notre Dame. But maybe not. Maybe not Alabama, though.
Well, right. So, I mean, you could debate that. I mean, in a perfect world, would you want him being your quarterback? Of course not. I mean, his inexperience showed at times, and I know some people poking fun at him about the migraines. I mean, look, I've never had a migraine, but I know people who do, and if he truly had a migraine, that's debilitating, and that's something I'm going to steer away from that part of it. But it's clear that he made some good throws, and he certainly made some plays where you kind of scratch your head. I mean, you think about, you alluded to the interception from Ladarius Webb. I mean, the receiver was open. He just threw it behind him. Now, I know Jefferson was streaking coming across from the other side, so he was trying to compensate a little bit there, but he overcompensated by about 2 steps, throwing it behind the receiver.
Well, I mean, both he and Hogan had, 6 to 8 pretty big busted plays on the defense that they hit on. I mean, when there were busted plays, the Ravens, paid for it no matter who the quarterback was on Sunday. There
were. I mean, that was a team that they were able to move the ball, and they moved the ball pretty darn well at times. But as is the case with teams like the Cleveland Browns, as is typically the case with young quarterbacks, you wait long enough, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. And you just need to be in position to take advantage. And certainly that happened with 5 takeaways. So, it wasn't a perfect performance. They certainly need to clean up the coverage. You could tell at the podium, as much as Eric Weddle is an upbeat guy, you could tell he was agitated by how they played. And how much of it is some bravado because this defense just thinks it's that good. That's part of it. And, hey, that's not a bad thing, by the way. And how much of it is, they do need to clean some stuff up. I think that's valid because some of the busted coverages, if they had been playing a more capable, more experienced quarterback, they might have found themselves in a much, much closer game at the end than 24-10. But that said, if you can come out of the game victorious, winning by a couple touchdowns, and you're not happy with how your defense played after they forced 5 turnovers and only allowed 10 points, that says a lot about your standards. That says a lot about your potential that you think you have as a defense. And that speaks well for this team moving forward as they get into deeper into the season when they know they'll be playing some tougher competition. Teams like the Steelers, teams like the Raiders who have some potent offenses, and that defense will have to clean up some of those blown assignments because a couple of those, a better team might have cost them a touchdown rather than moving the ball and then inevitably making a mistake because, well, they're the Browns.
Well, when you see it happen like that, and we also saw it on the offensive side of the ball as well, where, Wallace bit in when Flacco thought he was going long. Certainly Perryman had a miscommunication at one point as well with Flacco, and he hadn't run practice, so, that's kind of built into the offense. I think that's part of the cake early in the year when you haven't had your quarterback on the field. Now we're losing Yanda. I would expect that the offensive line will have some holding and have some, jumps and false starts and all that sort of thing. But the blown coverages were sort of all over the place. Left side, right side, underneath, deep, in some seams. It feels like Dean Pease is going to have some homework in the overnight that it's not one guy. That's going to be a miscommunication issue there that they're going to have to tighten up this week and moving forward.
Yeah, and every game's different. We know that. They're not going to be playing this Cleveland offense again until December, so we'll see how they fare when they're on the road against that team. But, yeah, it was just a case of, against Cincinnati, you felt like the defense was dictating, not tempo, but more imposing their will, as the 2000 Ravens used to do. It was more of a vice grip. You really got the sense that Cincinnati was completely... not helpless, probably be a little too strong, but along those lines, they weren't able to dictate anything that they wanted to do. It was almost like they were reacting to what the Ravens tried to do to them defensively. Whereas on Sunday against Cleveland, at times, they were playing some cover 2, they were playing some zone, maybe not quite as aggressive, maybe not as much man press at the line of scrimmage, and you can debate the merits of whether you do that or not a little bit more. But, it seemed like their cover 2, they were just on their heels a little bit too much. It seemed like this, where corners would pass off coverage to safety, the timing was a step or 2 off rather than being that well-oiled machine. And you're going to have some of that. As much as we romanticize defenses of the past, the 2000 Ravens didn't pitch 16 shutouts. So, they pitched 4, and they were fantastic.
Hey, I'll tell you what, man. There was a time, after the first blown coverage and the second blown coverage, I got a little pissed. I'm up at 5:13. Yeah. It's a little hot up there. Sure. Like, what are you guys doing, man? And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, the other team practices too.
Sure.
And they're not the, 77 Steelers. Like, they're just not, So, I understand bad things are going to happen, but I think it really does set sort of a high bar that you don't expect them to ever give up a first down right now. It's weird, right?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what happens when you shut out your opponent on opening day. I mean, that's just you have nowhere to go but down, really, when you think about it. So I'm not overly concerned about it. I think the big thing, and this is why I was encouraged to see what I saw from Tyus Bowser, is as great as Terrell Suggs has looked, they need one of those other outside linebackers. And you hope it's more than one. But you need some of those younger edge rushers to really step forward. I think one thing that was kind of lost in the second half, keep in mind, Brandon Williams missed most of the second half with the foot issue. Now, John Harbaugh said he's going to be fine, that it's not a long-term deal, but does that mean he's limited for Jacksonville? Does that mean he maybe misses the Jacksonville game? We don't know yet. Well, we'll have to see how that plays out. But I thought they wore down a little bit up front, but they need some of these youngsters. They need the Tyus Bowsers, the Tim Williams. They need Matt Judon. They need those guys to be able to put some heat on the quarterback. It can't just be Terrell Suggs. And I'm not saying it's only been Terrell Suggs, but you need some of those guys to more consistently step up and provide some heat as well. They've gotten some good pressure inside. Certainly they did against Cincinnati. That was a big part of the success against Andy Dalton.
Hey, Bowser got in there. So, we're starting to hear some of those names from April in the fall, which is good, right?
You want to see that. I mean, how many times have we had the conversation going back to 2013 and 2014 of this team not having enough young players stepping forward? It's great that Terrell Suggs is playing like he's 25. If you ask me to guess if he's going to do this for 16 games, I'm going to say no, because that's just what.
Because you've been watching football for a while, like I have, right? Yeah,
and we've seen that from Terrell Suggs even wear down. That's not.
Well, we saw from Steve Smith very, very vividly the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, it's not a knock on him. That's just reality. I mean, it's tough to do that for 16 weeks, let alone if you're 35 years old. So my point is, while Suggs is kind of taking the bar, is setting the bar right now with the way he's playing, you're hoping that as Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser and Matt Judon stack more snaps, stack more games, gain more experience, learn the tricks of the trade, learn what offensive linemen are all about and how they're trying to pass protect, you hope to see those guys start to step forward. And then come November and December, you don't have to have Terrell Suggs doing it all. In fact, and you saw this on Tuesday, they were a little more judicious in giving him a little more rest. You saw some Tim Williams. You saw a little more Tyus Bowser. In fact, Matt Judon was sliding inside as an inside rusher in some passing situations, which that was interesting to see. That's kind of the roles that Darius Smith has, which obviously he was out this week with the knee and ankle issue. So I don't want to say it's a work in progress because I think it's been pretty effective. I mean, they registered 10 quarterback hits on Sunday, and they had a few sacks. But it's something that you want to continue to see that evolve. You want to continue to see those young guys step forward and become those game wreckers in the pocket. Maybe not at the same level as Terrell Suggs, because that's a whole lot to ask. I mean, as you alluded to, talking about a future Hall of Famer here. I think he is really getting to that territory where he's sealing the deal. Whether it's the first ballot or whether he waits 7 or 8 years, he's looking like a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. So hard to ask any of those other guys to step up to that level, but you want to see some of these younger guys become a little bit more of a force, and then that allows you to put Suggs on a little bit more of a pitch count, puts a little less pressure on him, and then come December, you'll hopefully have a fresher version of Terrell Suggs.
Luke, I want to talk to you about Brandon Williams because, we can speculate all week one way or another about this week, the future, how it goes. But this was the position of depth, though, right? I mean, of all the positions on the team that we would have talked about at any point, depth-wise, the D-line was that unit for this team.
Yeah, and it still is. I mean, it's just that they had 3 of their defensive linemen inactive on Sunday. I mean,
sure.
That's kind of what they.
Well, they don't run them around on special teams. Period. Right.
I mean, very few D linemen are playing any special. You might have one that's on kick return, and a couple other units here and there. But so they had 3 defensive linemen down. I did not see Patrick Ricard play any defense. Keep in mind, he only played I think it was the final play against Cincinnati. He had the tackle for the loss actually last week. He's kind of viewed as more of a fullback, blocking tight end, extra option as an offensive lineman if you have an injury. So they were kind of playing with 4 defensive linemen, and then you had Brandon Williams get hurt. So they were a little light there. I think that's why you saw that group wear down. If Brandon Williams isn't available, which, again, we don't know. Harbaugh said it's not a long-term thing, but it could be a week. Who knows? Could be 2 weeks. We'll just have to see what the practice injury report looks like this week. But that is a position that they can, you certainly can't afford to lose Brandon Williams long-term. I mean, that's why they gave him all that money. But from a depth standpoint, that's a spot that, even if it just means he's a little more limited, you can afford to have that. You have guys like Carl Davis. You have Willie Henry. You have some other guys you can slide inside like Bronson Kafusi and Chris Wormley. So not as though the cupboard's bare there by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly fingers crossed that you hope Brandon Williams, with a couple days off here before they get back on the practice field, that he'll be ready to go because we know how important he is. And really last week, if you remember, one of the more, maybe not underrated because Pro Football Focus noted it, I wrote about it, some other people noted it as well. It didn't show up in the stat department, but he really put a lot of heat on Andy Dalton from that inside rush position. And, they were kind of missing that as the game went on Sunday against Kaiser and the Browns.
Sort of checked all the boxes here, right? 2-0. Defensively, they're getting after the quarterback. They're getting the ball in their hands. They're running with it. The offense isn't giving the ball away. Flacco's rounding in. The running game's rounding in. Yes, the Yonda thing is bad news, and I will continue to, be dour about that. And, I think we should all be pretty saddened by the Yonda thing. But defensively, in checking the boxes here, they've done everything you could ask them to do, and all the hand-wringing we did up until 10 days ago when they got this party started, worrying about where they would be. They're a very, very competitive football team right now. They're going to be okay this year. They're going to hang in there. I don't know how they're going to do out in Oakland 3 weeks from now. I don't know how they're going to do when Pittsburgh comes here, but I have a feeling they're going to travel over to London and play well on Sunday. I do.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the idea of playing well in London, if you've watched most of those London games over the years,
they're not well played.
It kind of reminds you a little bit of the Thursday night game.
Sure.
It really does. And I don't have the numbers to prove that, but anecdotal evidence and what people have said. Look, it's an adjustment. We talk so much about a Western time zone, going out west or West teams coming out to the East. Reality is these guys are going to be playing a game that's 9:30 local time. Now, they'll get out there a couple days and get used to it. It'll be 2:30 London time when they're playing, but that's an adjustment, and there's a lot of travel involved, and that's not making an excuse for the Ravens. The Jaguars are going to deal with the same thing. They have a little more experience dealing with it, having played London games before, but it'll certainly be interesting. But this is a team that I think anyone going into the season expected them to beat the Cleveland Browns. So I don't think there's anything we saw on Sunday that was terribly surprising. It was good to see.
But if you had lost to the Cleveland Browns, you would think, "Oh God,"
sure,
right?
Sure. Unless you thought they're going to be 5-11, and maybe there were some people who thought they were going to be that bad. But to me, I'll go back to what I said last week. For them to go on the road and play the way they did against Cincinnati, and look, since then, Cincinnati has fired their offensive coordinator. They're 0-2. They haven't scored a touchdown. They're a disaster, and you wonder how that's going to wind up there for the current regime. But that said, given the fact that the Ravens hadn't won in Cincinnati in 2011, that alone kind of that was the one that kind of makes you take pause and say, okay, this team might be a little bit better than I thought. I told you last week. My official prediction for the Ravens was 8-8, and the fact that they beat Cincinnati, that adjusted to 9-7 right off the bat. And I think it's possible this defense could be that good. It could be that special. And the big question will be, can the offense be good enough? And what they were able to do against the Browns on Sunday, that was good enough. Now, it's the Cleveland Browns. They're playing at home. You keep that in mind. There's still a lot of things that need to be answered about this offense. But I liked what I saw from Joe Flacco. I liked what I saw overall from the offensive line, with the understanding that losing Yonda is going to be a colossal challenge for that group. But I saw enough from the running game, saw more in the passing game. The next step is the next logical step is to get the wide receivers a little more consistently involved. So, if you're kind of going to view it in the same way that they do in the off season when they get into training camp. Early on in training camp, they're talking about installation, and they build their offense. And you've almost seen a similar formula the defense has allowed this to be this way, but they were able to primarily focus on their running game in week 1. Week 2, a little more balance, throw to backs, throw to tight ends with effectiveness. And you hope now week 3, and certainly as you get closer to the Pittsburgh game, closer to that road game out in Oakland, 2 games that are going to be really challenging. Let's call a spade a spade. You hope that offense is closer at that point to firing on all cylinders. So, I think overall you have to be pleased, injuries aside, and my goodness, I mean, they've had the injuries going back to the beginning of June with the number of players they've lost, so that's part of the narrative. That aside, have to be pretty pleased with where the Baltimore Ravens are at 2 weeks through the season, standing at 2-0.
Good vibes for everyone headed over to London and Wembley. We will be partying on Saturday from 11 until, well, whenever you feel like leaving us. We're meeting at the Fox at XL. It is a pub in the Docklands area of East London, just off the Royal Victoria stop, near the Emirates Air cable car. All the information's up on our WNST.net website, as well as you can email me anytime, nasty@WNST.net. We're also out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and wherever the internet takes you across the pond, including the buyatoyota.com audio vault. It's there 24 hours a day. Anything that we do here, we're doing a lot of London travel tips because I do know there's so many of us going over there. Luke's making the journey. I'm making the journey as well. And we will be broadcasting from over there on Facebook and tweeting stuff up and trying to have a little bit of fun. My wife's donor, Niels, is joining us. My son and his wife are going with us. All of our best friends are going over. So it will be a big British hootenanny all week long, and we got some great radio ahead for you as well. Don't forget, get on the WNST text service. That gets you all the breaking news, injuries, things that as they happen, including the Marshall Yonda situation as it unfolded on Sunday afternoon. You get it first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Don't forget, our morning newspaper also ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. Viva London. Join us. Let's go have some fun this week. Maybe come back 3-0 next week. We got some live shows coming up later on in the month. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero. Had a big week around here with our sizzling steak tournament, as well with our friends from Roost Chris over there on Tuesday. We did our show on Wednesday. I was at the Super Bowl 35 champs at Roost Chris at Pier 5 over the weekend. We had an incredible little reunion scene and a lot of my pictures up on Facebook. But what did they say? Remember the times of your life. Well, the 0-1 Super Bowl Ravens, hey, don't knock the 17 Ravens. They're 2-0 right now. They're perfect. So let's treat them as such as we head off to London. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.